Shabbat Shalom. Mishanei makom, mishanei mazal. That's what they say. You change your place, and you'll change your luck. We'll get started tonight. We're on page 10 with Yedid Nefesh. Page 10, and I will invite everybody to take a good deep breath and put down your burdens from the week as we prepare to enter Shabbat. Page 10, Yedid Nefesh. Yedid nefesh avarachaman mishoch avdach el retzonach yarutz avdach mo'ayal yishtachave mul hadarach ki yerav lo yedidutach Minofet suf vechotam hadur nae ziv haolam nafshi cholat avatach ana il narefana lah beharot lah noam zivach az titchazek v'titrapei V'hayetalach shivchat olam v'tik yehemu rachamecha v'chusna al ben ohavach ki ze kama nichsaf lirob tiferet uzach ana eli machmad libi Chushana ve'al titalam higalena ufros chaviv alai et sukat shelomach ta'ir eretz mikvodach nagila v'nismecha bach mahir ahuv kiva moed v'choneini ki me'olam. Yadadadadadai, 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 yadadadadadai. Pages 11 and 12, Psalm 95 will begin and end together, but the middle we'll do silently. L'chu niranena l'Adonai, nariya letzor yisheinu, nikadma fanav betoda, bizmirot nariya lo. Ki el gadol Adonai lo. Ki hu Eloheinu v'Adonai. Arba'im shana akut bedor, va'omaram to'e levavhem, v'hem lo yadu derachai, asher nishpati v'api, im yuvun el menuchati. Page 13. Shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz, shiru l'Adonai, baruchu shemo, basru miyom liyom yeshuato, sapru v'goyim kevodo, bechol ha'amim nifleotav, ki gadol Adonai, Umahulal me'od, norahu, al kol Elohim, haydai, ki kol Elohe, ha'amim elilim, v'Adonai shamayim asa, hod v'hadar, lefanav, oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho, havu l'Adonai mishpachot amim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kevod shemo, se'u mincha, Uvo lechatzrotav, aydai, ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh, chilu mipanav kol haaretz, imru v'goyim, Adonai malach, aftikon tevel ba'al timot, yadin amim b'meisharim, yismechu hashamayim v'tagil haaretz, yiram hayam, lo ya'aloz sadai v'chol asher bo aydai az yiranenu kol atzei ya'ar lifnei Adonai kiva lishpot haaretz yishpot tevel betzedek ve'amim be'emunato yadai Page 15. Let's see. Sonia, would you read for us? You coming up? Come on. That's great. Thanks. I'll need her to be responsible.
Adonai reigns. Let the earth be glad. The many distant lands rejoice. Thick darkness around the divine. Righteousness and justice secure God's throne. Fire goes before God, consuming besiegers round about. Flashes of lightning illumine the land. The earth watches and trembles. Mountains melt like wax at the approach of Adonai, at the approach of the Master of all the earth.
The heavens tell of God's
righteousness, and all the nations see God's glory. Worshippers of idols, be shamed for praising false gods. All that is deemed supreme, bow before God. And hears of it and rejoices. The cities of Judah exult. Adonai, past judgment. You, Adonai, are above all that is earthly, exalted over all that is worshipped as divine. Those who love Adonai hate evil. God protects the lives of the faithful, saving them from the hands of the sinful. Light is sown for the righteous, and joy for the upright. Rejoice in Adonai, you righteous people, and thank God as you pronounce the divine holy name.
Page 17, we'll read this one individually, silently. Mizmor shir l'Adonai shir chadash ki nifla rasa hoshia lo yamino uzra kodsho. לפני אדוני קיווה לשפוט הארץ, ישפוט הבל בצדק ועמים במישרים. Page 19, we'll begin silently, but we will read together, we'll sing together the conclusion, Romamu, on page 20. Adonai malach yirgazu amim, yoshev keruvim tanut haaretz. Adonai mazinu. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. Page 21, we will read Mizmor, let's sing together, Mizmor LeDavid. Mizmor LeDavid, havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kevod shemo, ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh, kol Adonai al hamayim, el hakavod hirim, Adonai al מים רבים. כל אדוני בכוח, כל אדוני בהדר, כל אדוני שובר ארזים, וישבר אדוני את ארזי הלבנון, ויקידם כמו עגל לבנון וסריון, כמו בן רעמים. כל אדוני חוצב לעבוד אש, כל אדוני יכיל מדבר, יכיל אדוני מדבר קדש, כל אדוני יכול אל איילות, ויחשוף יערות, ובהיכלו כולו אומר כבוד, כולו אומר כבוד. אדוני למבול ישב, וישב אדוני מלך לעולם, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו ושלום. Turn to Lechad Day, page 23, and we will do the first 5 verses in one melody. We'll switch after the 5th verse. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם ניסוחה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה, קומי צאי מתוך ההפכה, רב לך שבט בעמק הבכה, והוא יחמול עלייך חמלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התנערי מעפר קומי, לבשי בגדי תפארתך עמי, על יד בן ישי בית הלחמי, קרבה אל נפשי גאלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לא תבושי ולא תקלמי, מה תשתוכחי ומה תמי בך, יחסו עניי עמי ונבנתה עיר אל תילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. והיו למשיסה שוסייך, ורחקו כל מבלייך, יסיס עלייך אלוהיך, כמשוש חתן על כלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תעריצי, על יד איש בן פרצי ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום, עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה, ובצלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Turn to page 27. We're seated as we continue with Mizmor Shir. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי הנה Tzadik katamar yifrach ke'erez balavanon yizke shetulim beveit Adonai bechatrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvon beseva deshenim verananim yeyo lehagid Ki yashar Adonai tzuri velo avlatavo. We'll read on page 29. Please read responsively with me. Adonai is sovereign, robed in splendor, girded in strength. The earth stands firm, not to be dislodged. From earliest time you were enthroned. You are eternal. In your house, beautiful in its holiness, your testimonies endure, Adonai, for all time. Mourner's Kaddish, Kaddish Tom, is found on page 30. If you are reciting Kaddish, I'll invite you to join me at this time, whether you're with us here in person or if you're joining us on the live stream. Page 30. Yit Gadal Vit Kadash Shmei Rabba Ba'alama Divra Kirutei V'yamlich malchutei b'chayei uvyomei u'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv ve'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach la'alam u'lalamei alamaya. Yitbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'ar ve'yitromam ve'yitnasei ve'yithadar ve'yit'aleh ve'yithalal shmei t'kudsha b'richu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush v'chata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'alama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'imromav hu ya'asei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Shabbat shalom. I don't think I missed anybody on my first greeting. I don't think anybody's come in since we started. But good to see everybody this evening. And we are. Is anybody here for an anniversary blessing? Any of our couples here for an anniversary? Any anniversary? This is actually a pop quiz. Does your anniversary fall in November? And do you remember that your anniversary falls in November? So I think hopefully everyone's passed the quiz. That's good. Very good. Well, we'll be starting on page 39, our service proper with Mariv. Please rise. Page 39a, after which we'll be going to page 40, after we get done with 39a. Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. You may be seated. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro mariv aravim v'chochma. Umavir yom umevi laila umavdil bein yom uvein laila Adonai tzvaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai amari v'aravim. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael amacha ahavta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadta Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shochveinu u'v'kumeinu nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu ve'orech yameinu Uvahem nege yomam v'layla ve'ahavatcha tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch ata Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך מכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, והיה עם שמות תשמות. ויאמר אדוני משה Adonai Elohechem emet, ve'emunah kol zeh v'kayam aleinu ki hu Adonai. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים ובני ישראל, לך אנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורת תהילות אוסף אלה, ידי דדי די ידי דדי ידי דדי די ידי דדי ידי דדי די ידי דדי, מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה, זה אלי אנו, ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ידי דדי די ידי דדי ידי דדי די ידי דדי, ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. Page 45, we'll read in the English, we'll read together. Allow us, Adonai our God, to sleep peacefully. Awaken us to life, O Sovereign. Spread over us your canopy of peace. Restore us with your good counsel and save us for the sake of your name. Shield us. Remove from us enemies, pestilence, sword, starvation, and sorrow. Remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you, God, watch over and deliver us. And you, God, are sovereign, merciful, and compassionate. Ensure our going and coming for life and peace, now and forever. Ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha, baruch ata Adonai, hapore sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. We rise on page 46. V'shameru v'nei Yisrael et ha-shabbat, la'asot et ha-shabbat, לדורותם ברית עולם ידי ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. יתכתב ויקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיינו כל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם לעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל, שמי תקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא, ואמרו amen. Silent Amidah begins on page 47. We will rise on page 53 for the symbolic recapitulation of the Amidah. ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם, ויכל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה, וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Konei Shamayim va'aretz, Magen Avot Bidvaro, Mechaye Metim b'mamaro, Ha'el HaKadosh en kamohu, Hameniach le'amo, B'yom Shabbat kodsho, Kivam ratza lehaniach lahem, Kivam ratza lehaniach lahem, Lefanav na'avod be'yira v'fachad, V'nodei lishmo b'chol yom tamid, Me'on ha'berachot, El ha'hodaot, Adon ha'shalom, Mekadesh ha'shabat umvarech shevi'i, Umeniach b'kdusha, Le'am medushnei oneg, Zecher lema'aseh, Lema'aseh v'reishit. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Ritzei v'imnuchatenu, Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, V'tein chelkenu b'toratecha, Sabeinu mituvecha, V'samachenu b'shuatecha, V'taher libenu, Le'avdecha be'emet, V'hanchileinu, Adonai Eloheinu, Be'ahava uvratzon, Shabbat kodshecha, Ve'anuchu v'Yisrael, Mekadeshei shemecha, Baruch Ata Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabba, Be'alma divra kiruteh, Ve'yamlich malchuteh, B'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayerchol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala u'bizman karivim ru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach, Le'alam le'alamei alamaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnasei, V'yithadar, V'yit'aleh, V'yithalal shmei D'kudsha, B'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tush bechata v'nechamata, da'amiran ba'alama v'imru, Amen. Teitkabal tzlotan devarhon d'cha Yisrael, kadam avohon d'vishmaya v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Sabri. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon inchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, Ki hu yom techila lemikrei kodesh, Zeicher letziat Mitzrayim, Ki vanu vacharta, Ve'otanu kidashta, Mikol ha'amim, Ve'shabbat kodshecha, Ba'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch Ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. And we will... I keep wanting to be able to tell you to sit down, but we're going to continue with Aleinu on page 56. So please rise. I promise, very soon, right after Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'tet gedula liotzer b'reishit, shelo asanu ki goyei ha'aratzot, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שנותן השמיים ויוסד ארץ, משה וקרוב בשמיים ממעל שכינה. כן, נקרא ולחר. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. ושמו אחד. Kaddish Tome, Mourner's Kaddish is here on page 58. As we turn to it, we'll note yortzites that are being observed in our community. Those of Sam Finkel, father of Sandy Richards, and she's remembering tonight, as well as David Basson, brother of Jeff Basson, and also falling today, Shabbat, that of Ira Schwartz. In the coming week, we'll also be observing the yortzites of Libby Barron, Minnie Glassman, Francis Morowitz-Hordes, Abraham Malko, Jacques Dabah, Gertrude Schramm, Ida Basson, Nadine Fisher, David Glass, Arlene First, William Weiser, Minnie Levine, Jacob Binderman Jr., Nellie Callis, Simon Kaltman, Max Lipschitz, Dolly G. Sturman, Beverly Lichten, Robert Pornoy, Isabel Newman, Marjorie Amster, and Hannah Goyman. We also think at this time of those whom we've lost in the last year, among them Helene Katz, Evelyn Seltzer, Pat Keeler, Marge Ryder, Amy Perlman, Norm Epstein, Paul Bassa, Steve Blyer, Bernie Kiwi, Ron Kabikoff, Dan Geyer, Charles Albright, Bernie Slavitt, Elaine Beagleson, Frank Grossman, George Fisher, Selma Cohn, Sally Prager, Lori Gupp, Ben Koff, and also Alfred Horvitz. If there's anyone else that you are thinking of or remembering and would like to share a name, I'll invite you to do so. And if there's anyone who's here remembering someone and is specifically saying Kaddish for them tonight, or has anything they wanted to say about the person they're remembering, I will also invite you to do so. Okay. Kaddish Tome, Mourner's Kaddish is here on page 58. Page 58. And if you are reciting it once again, I will invite you to join with me, whether you're here with us in person or with us on the live stream. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah. Ba'alama divra kirutei v'amlich malchutei v'chayei chon uv'yomei chon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen. Yahei shmei Rabbah mavarach la'alam u'lalamei alamaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnasei v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei dekudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'alama v'imru amen. Yahei shalama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Bimru. Amen. I look to Bill because he's such an expert announcement giver, but I will try to offer a tamtzit, a little extract of our announcements for the upcoming week. It's a big weekend. We've got a bat mitzvah tomorrow morning, the bat mitzvah of Autumn Ash. I hope to see some of you there tomorrow. And afterward, there will be a lunch which was theoretically intended as sort of you can stay, you can go. The lunches themselves are boxed, so if a person were to take the box and not eat here, that would be within the intention of the family, because we may or may not have a whole lot of space set up for exactly the number of guests. They were anticipating a whole lot of guests, but we do have some space set up in the social hall as well, and those who are here and are comfortable, given the spacing and everything else, are welcome to eat in the social hall as well. Beyond that, on Sunday, we will be having our bingo, which we can refer to as the inaugural or first annual, depending on whom you ask and some of the experts. I think was it Strunk and White probably would tell us first annual is not okay, but probably, I don't know, the Chicago style manual might tell us something different. I don't know. I failed that class. No, I didn't. I did okay in that class, but still, I don't remember. The point being is the first time we've done this, and we're hoping it's going to be a successful and fun way for us to raise money for the school. I know that we've had a lot of late-breaking entries and sales over the course of the last several days, so it's very exciting. We know that we've got some good sponsorship, so for many of you, and so for that, thank you. Hope to see some of you folks there, but do remember you don't have to be there to win. So that's also a positive there. And our very own Barry Wolfson will be calling the winners. Further on into the week, I'm starting 2 classes on Tuesday. A Parsha class on Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. That'll be here at the synagogue. So if you are interested, if you are bored, if you are curious, if you are any number of things, it might be a good fit for you, and I may see you on Tuesday. We will be both examining the Parsha and also talking about some traditional commentary on the Parsha. So could be fun. And on Tuesday evening, I'll be starting a new iteration of our Introduction to Judaism class. If you know some folks who may be interested, let me know, because this iteration will almost certainly not run the full length because one of the people in it is going to be packing up and moving soon. So, but she wanted to get started learning about Judaism, so I said, we'll go ahead and start. But if you know some other people who may be interested, please let me know, and I will be glad to be in touch, and we'll be starting a new iteration, possibly parallel to this one. Rabbi Shapper's got a new class starting soon on Jewish music, so that's also another item. You can catch all that on the rotating screen in the lobby, and I cannot remember when her first class is, but it's coming up. And that's all I've got. Does anybody else have any other breaking news? Yes, Edie? Yes, the time change, right. That pesky time change happens on Saturday night, early Sunday morning. So good reminder. Very good. Yes. And that's all the news. All right. Well, we'll conclude with Yigdal, and before we move on to B's presentation, we're excited to have you tonight, B. So we're looking forward to your presentation. And page 62. I'm trying to remember the. What's the? We did the Adon Olam. It's the Weston Synagogue melody that we. Do you remember? What are you looking for? It's a. Sephardic. That's not the one. It's close. That's all right. Not that one. It's the other one. That's the one. That's the one. There we go. Page 62. Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach nimtza v'ein ed el metziuto echad v'ein yachid ki yichudo ne'lam v'gam ein sof le'achduto ein lo demut haguf v'ein o guf lo na'aroch ela kedushato kadmon l'chol davar asher nivra rishon v'ein reshit le'reshito hino adon olam v'chol notzar Yoreh gedulato umalchuto shefan nevuato netano elan shesegulato vetifarto lo kam b'Yisrael kemo she'od navi umabit et tmunato Toratem et natan le'amo el al yad nevi'o ne'eman beito lo yachalifa el velo yamir dato le'olamim lezulato Tzofe ve'yodei asetarenu mabit lesof davar bekadmato gomel ish chesed kemifalo noten l'rashara kerishato yishlach leketz yamin meshichenu Lifdot machake ketz Yeshuato Meitim Yechaye'el Berov Chasto Baruch Hadei Ad Shem Tehilato Meitim Yechaye'el Berov Chasto Baruch Hadei Ad Shem Tehilato. We got there eventually. And now I am pleased to introduce the Open Guard, whom many of you know. I don't have a prepared introduction for you, so okay.
I probably don't want to hear what people would say.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you would. But you see, you teach at UC.
I
used to teach at UC in the English.
In the English department, I taught academic writing and poetry writing.
Academic writing and poetry writing. Okay, very good. Which is very relevant to what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I will cede the stage, as it were.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah Barnard asked me to talk about how a book of poems comes together. And I thought there's really not that much to say about how a book of poems come together. Basically, you have the poems, which someone has written either over a long period of time or not a long period of time. And the poems in a book usually want to be in some kind of relationship. It's almost as if they're talking to each other or in harmony. You don't just throw a bunch of poems together. But beyond that, it gets either more or less complex. So instead of talking about that, I decided to talk about a project that some of you know I launched myself on with a couple of friends. In fact, a lot of you know because Bill kindly announced it one Saturday. I had a student, when we still had night classes at UC, I had an adult student in my introduction to poetry class. And after the class, we became friends. She also lived in Northside. And it eventually came out that she had cancer. She had breast cancer. And she lived with that for about 20 years, and it became clear that she wasn't going to make it. And I asked her whether she had thought about putting a book together, because she had been continuing to take poetry classes all those years from different teachers. She started with the introductory class and went all the way through the graduate class. And she said she hadn't considered putting anything together, so I told her I didn't at that point want to put any pressure on her. She had enough pressure. But I told her if she decided she wanted to put something together to please let me know, and I would help her if I could. And that was the last I heard of it until after her death, when her partner contacted me and gave me some poems to work with. And I was still, that was very soon after my back surgery, which some of you remember really well, and I was still in what's called surgery mind, like your mind isn't all the way there yet. So I really couldn't, I had this stack of poems like that, and I couldn't make sense of them by myself. I couldn't sort them out. So my friend John, who has been, we went to graduate school together, so I've known him. I've known John more than half of my life, and he said he would help me because I called him and said, I can't deal with this by myself. So the two of us set out to put this book together. And both of us understand a book of poetry since we were at the Iowa workshop together and had been working with each other's poems for a long time. A book of poems to be a book that celebrates the poems. It's not about the poet. It's about the poems. Celebrating the poems. And that was our intention with Kathy's book when we finally got all the poems picked out. To give you some idea of where we thought we were going, because things never turn out the way you think they will. I brought some books to give you, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure I have enough to sort of look at them. Maybe you can share. So maybe you can share with someone. These are all examples of books that do what I'm talking about in terms of celebrating the poems. Ariel, who has Ariel? Okay, that's a pretty famous book. Those of you who know or have read poetry have probably heard of Sylvia Plath. She was very famous. Unfortunately, she was probably as famous or more famous for taking her own life than she was for her poems. But they were brilliant poems. And if you have that book, you can look at the front and notice that other than a foreword, a 3-page foreword by a well-known poet of the time, there's nothing in the book about her. That might have been partly because people knew about her, but it's also because the book isn't about her. It's letting the poems speak for her. You'll see the same thing in Sloane Kettering. Again, there's front matter and a foreword. That's by Ava Kovner. Some of you will recognize that name. He was a very famous partisan, a Jewish partisan in World War II. He fought the Nazis and ended up dying of cancer. But again, his book is a lovely, if it can be lovely, book of poetry about his experience at Sloane Kettering, and it's about him, but it's not. It's his thoughts. But I think it does a good job of balancing. Same with Mandelstam's poems. Someone has Mandelstam, Osip Mandelstam. Anyway, he was a Russian poet. Some of you might have heard of him. He was Jewish but didn't observe. He was Russian in the time of the early Soviet period and ended up dying in a camp, freezing. And again, his books of poems are lovely poems, and they're not about him. You're getting the drift. And if you have the book, you can look and see what I mean, that leafing through, there's not a lot of stuff, there's poems. There's also one a little bit different called The Wild Braid. That's an interesting book. I can't remember the Stanley Kunitz, who taught a lot of poets and was a poet himself. That's about his life as a gardener. He spent a lot of time in his garden, so he has a lot of little meditations on gardening and some poems and some discussion. But so in a sense it is about him, but it's also about what he's thinking about. And There's one called Long Falling Light by Mark Layman, a wonderful, funny guy who paid me a fortune a couple of years ago to go through this folder of poems like that and tell him which ones I thought were good enough for a book, and he argued with me every single step of the way and pretty much ignored what I said, but hey, it was his deal, and he paid for a really nice hardcover book, his poems, after the beginning of, with the author's introduction, there's nothing in it about him. So that's my sense of what a book should be like. However, the project of putting Kathy's book together became pretty much surprise a minute and didn't quite turn out. It's a wonderful book. Her poems are wonderful, but not quite as, I guess, strict. I want to say not as Catholic, but this isn't the right place to say that. Not as strictly honing to the poems as John and I would have liked, but it's still a wonderful book. One thing we found out, the reason we went with the publisher we did was that John had done a book with this publisher years before, so John assumed he was working in the same way. The first surprise we got, because we thought we just have to sell 125 books, and we thought, no big deal. No, it turned out we had to sell 125 books before he would print them. So in addition to getting the book together, we had to work like crazy to sell them. If we didn't like that and broke the contract, we would then owe him $500. So you can imagine that all of this stuff increased the pressure greatly. And then the next thing the publisher decided is he didn't like the length of the book. He wanted it longer. Books of poetry are becoming longer. For what reason, I don't know. They just are. So he told us that he wanted us to add 10 to 20 pages to the book. Again, we didn't have much choice, so we had to do that, and we still feel that it would have been a better book in the shorter version. This is beginning to show you how complex getting a book put together can be. It isn't always, but it is. These are the kinds of things we were dealing with. In terms of front matter, things like just basically introductory stuff like what year something was published, that was and a bit of an introduction. That was by Kathy's partner. That made sense. Then it started getting more complicated. If you start thinking about who is the audience for the book, who is this directed to, particularly in a case where it's a small print run, 125 books aren't very many, and probably most of the people that are going to be reading this are going to be people that knew Kathy, which would be people from Northside and people from her church group, would be probably the main buyers of the book. There's a note from the editors, John and I, which is pretty standard. And then, surprise, surprise, Kathy's partner stepped in and started presenting us, often over email, with things she wanted in the book. And not only did I not particularly want to argue with her, but it seemed quite inappropriate to argue with her. So we basically didn't know from one day to the next what she was going to want us to put in the book. So the first thing she wanted us to put in the book was a letter from Rachel Carson to her partner, and death it says something at the end that alludes to death because one of the partners is dying. And my question here is, if you want to celebrate Kathy's poems, is it a great idea to start out with the idea of death? Even if you know that Kathy didn't make it. If this is a book of poems representing Kathy's best work, maybe it's not a great idea to start out that way. And also because that wasn't the only thing the book was about. It was about nature, it was about going on trips, it was about hiking, it was about winter hikes, in the moonlight. So that one little addition, I think, at the beginning sort of can affect a lot. That's one example of that. And then at the back of the book, the same sort of thing started happening, and my co-editor started doing this sort of thing too. He decided that he wanted two things in it. Actually, one of them was at the beginning of the book first. They were both things that she had done for his class. One was talking about how the sonnet format influenced her writing. The other was notes. She talked about the assignment was to base poems on exemplary poems from a website. And so he had one of those at the beginning of the book and one at the end. And I finally said, is that a great idea? So he decided it would be okay to put them together at the end, but then we had to reset the whole book up again. And he worked like a devil, and the book turned out wonderfully, but these are the kinds of things that just made it awkward, to say the least. And if we're, again, heading for that shining kind of book that just represents the poet so well, I felt like it was getting difficult to get there. And then at the very end, and this was one there was no way we could do anything about, and it wasn't just me, my co-editor wasn't always crazy about this stuff, but again, not stuff you can fight about under the circumstances. There was a letter from the dead that Kathy had written to her partner to to read after her death. And once again, is that really a great way to end a book that's not supposed to be just about that? And that was really hard because it was her partner. It was 4 years later, but still, obviously, it was a huge loss. What do? You shut your mouth and let it happen. That's all you can do. On the other hand, sorry I didn't have these out. These are Kathy's book. The last poem in the book, which I think is gorgeous, is the title is Blue Envelope, and it reads, "What if the soul is an airmail envelope, light as breath, yet fibrous and sturdy? Words swim just beneath its surface, hungry fish. I was taught that the essence of my being is a pearl enclosed in mortal flesh. But I have felt my soul's blue currents hover a mere gasp away from the hair on my forearm, the arch of my foot. I covet my body too much, its miles of nerves delivering salt and sweet, and I mourn the irony this tingling, aching flesh has introduced to my soul. I wonder how I will recognize it when, after the decisive slice or the slow lifting away, the envelope, released of its contents, slips under the table." To me, this is just, imagine the book ending with that instead of ending with notes on the writing process and so forth. So that's maybe something about how ideally how the poem came to be a book shouldn't have gone, but they're still wonderful poems. There are plenty available if you're interested, but that's a bit of an idea of how I value poetry and some really fine poems that I'm proud to have been associated with. So thank you for listening.
did exactly the right thing.